Howdy, howdy. We are live for another Friday night, and we are about to engage our segment of the hashtag TQIF lineup to start off the weekend, celebrate this Friday night by talking about this week's episode of Star Trek. And later on, as the final installment of the hashtag TQIF lineup, we're going to have Starfleet Boy After Dark over on that channel. So if you want to go check out that show later on, I think we're actually going to be doing a watch along of a Star Trek movie to celebrate our friend Marcelo's birthday. Well, yeah, I see we already have some people in the audience here to hear us chat about Star Trek Picard. So Jill 47's here, Ruben's here, Thomas Hill is here.
Valerie, please throw Ruben's comment about the Tex-Trek theme, which I believe was composed by your buddy Trenton?
By Trenton Lacey. Attorney at law.
Good stuff. And thank you, Ruben. Much appreciated.
Yes, thank you, Ruben. Yeah, you get to hear that every week, every Friday at 7 p.m. Central. So we should get that started. I just want to give everyone like a quick disclaimer, though. My partner is gone right now, and whenever she comes home, our dog is gonna freak the F out. He's gonna go crazy. So I'm gonna try to work around the excited dog noises. So just bear with me when we get to that. But he's only well, I can't say he's only human. He's only canine, but we work with what we got. But Dave, you ready to talk about some Star Trek Picard?
Absolutely. This is a huge episode, so yeah, let's roll with it.
All right. I'm Fathery.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 188th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek, old and new, and proud members of the TrekSphere network. Tonight, we are talking about Star Trek Picard, Season 2, Episode 9, Hide and Seek, written by Matt Okumura and Chris Derrick, and directed by Michael Weaver. All three of these names are new to me. They're all newcomers to Star Trek. And before we talk about the episode they made for us, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, remind everyone that we are 1 week away from Star Trek Strange New Worlds finally arriving. We get not only the Picard Season 2 finale next week, but the Strange New Worlds series premiere.
And the trailer, well, not the trailer, but the
opening titles.
You can watch the opening titles now. I wasn't going to do it, and then Fathery was like, oh, I had to see if Anson Mount said Space the Final Frontier and did the thing. And I was like, okay. I watched it. It was pretty cool.
I mean, you could have just asked me if he did or didn't.
Well, then I wanted to hear it. It wasn't like I didn't want to hear your dumbass just tell me.
You needed to hear it from Captain Pike himself, huh?
Yeah, that was the whole point.
Well, yeah,
anyway.
it was really cool. I liked it. That's my favorite of the modern Star Trek opening titles. It had the best theme, I think, of all of them, composed by Jeff Russo, who's not doing the music for the show, by the way. The show is going to be scored by Nami Mumalad, if I'm getting her name right. I'm sure I'm not. But she scores Star Trek Prodigy. She is Michael Giacchino's protege, and I think it's really cool she landed this gig.
That's very fitting because Prodigy is a kind of compact, energetic show. Giacchino, through the movies, has been channeling a lot of sort of high energy, and then we kind of associate that with the original series, that sort of the larger than life scores. They had some really bold, dramatic scores, some very moving music. So she seems like a good heir to that style.
Yeah, and I dug the theme. It borrowed a lot from the original series, but it kind of had like the same notes in a different key, and some new flourishes and stuff on there, and great visuals. I wasn't that impressed with the visuals when I just saw it on my phone. I thought it looked good, but I didn't know if it like rivaled Star Trek Voyager that had like the ice ring and all of that around the planet and everything. But then I watched it on my TV on the big screen, and I really, really liked it. And just like that John Eves redesign of the 1701 Constitution class flying around. So yeah, I'm hyped just to see the opening titles again. With it, just the fact that it has like a whole episode attached to it. Thursdays is like a big bonus for me. That's how much I dug the opening titles.
I've only watched it on my phone, and so I'm still making up my mind on it. But I will say it's a surprisingly emotional experience to see the Enterprise in particular, a version of the Constitution class ship. As many as variants as we see of the saucer with the nacelles, there's something special about the Enterprise that's pretty moving to see. So
yeah, that original Matt Jeffries design shape is iconic. And Dave, you know how I mentioned when I watched DS9, when the camera pans over to the station, I always feel like I'm going home. Like that's where I grew up.
Yeah,
that was home. But I also grew up in love with the original series, and when I was watching that on my TV earlier, the opening titles, and I saw the Enterprise, I didn't feel like I was going home, but I felt like, oh, that's like the family car. That's what we drove around in when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So, so very exciting for that. And Anson Mount tweeted some excitement on the opening titles. He was sharing that this morning on Twitter. Dave's going to tell us what he actually said.
Yeah. Anson's been he's been a good spokesperson for Star Trek. He feels Pike like, he kind of projects that. So he says, perhaps the greatest honor of my career to date was getting to utter these words, space, the final frontier. I could not be more proud to be a part of the @Star Trek on Paramount Plus team, and I could not be more grateful to the Star Trek community. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. So,
you're welcome.
He's been humble. He's been cool. Seems like Pike.
Yeah, so really cool, and we're gonna have a lot of fun talking about that show. Talking about the PICARD finale next week as well. It's gonna be a double header.
Right.
Week for us. In the meantime, though, we do have this penultimate episode of season 2. But I forgot to mention that Pike doing the space, the final frontier narration thing. That was the thing I was telling people. That's what I want most in the show. That I don't know if I'm gonna get it, but I want it. I know people that have already seen the first half of the season. People have gotten like screeners for review purposes, and I was too nervous to like ask anybody because like I didn't want to be sad if they told me like no, they actually don't do that. So I thought that was really cool. I'm curious what people want to see in Strange New Worlds though. What's the thing that you would most like to see in this first season of Strange New Worlds? Comment and let us know. We might share some of that stuff in the future. But yeah, let's talk about this PICARD episode. Or Dave, did you have something you wanted to say? What you hope to see in Strange New Worlds?
I have not particularly weighed this one. In times past, we've done sort of the deeper dive on that.
We'll do a whole podcast, like a top 10 list.
Yeah. Now we have so many Star Trek shows, we don't know what to do with them. I'd say Gorn, just to be me, but I know that we can't see Gorn really until Kirk's time, I think, right?
Yeah, because Arena was first contact.
Yeah. I want them to see them striding the surface of planets. That's what I want. I want super cool planets with floating plateaus and weird geological effects and all that kind of weird. I want weird, cool planets.
Yeah, I think that's a guarantee. I think they're going to be putting that AR wall to use.
You know what would be the weirdest thing that I sort of want is I want an kind of old-fashioned outro where the crew sits around chatting with each other about the day's events. Spock makes where Spock would make a joke and they'd be like, "Mr. Spock, you're getting more human every day." I kind of want a little bit of yes, freeze frame. I want a little bit of hokiness, maybe like that. I don't know if I actually want that, but I kind of want it.
I think there's probably a way to do a modern spin on that, but we'll find out.
I remember that
soon.
They used to do that. This is a weird thing to associate with, but I remember like Smallville kind of did that. Clark would be up in the barn and be like, "I don't know where things are going with me and Lana anymore," and but he would reflect on whatever happened.
Well, let's go ahead and switch gears to 2024 to Picard running around on modern day Earth. And I'm just going to recap this episode real quickly by reading the official synopsis, and then I'll kind of expand on it with spoilers before we each give our broad thoughts on the episode. The official synopsis reads, Picard and his crew fight for their lives as they come under attack from a new incarnation of an old enemy. But to survive, Picard must first face the ghosts of his past. Seven and Raffi have a final showdown with Jurati. So Jurati is the new incarnation of that old enemy of the Borg Queen, but through some shenanigans with the transporter and hologram Elnor, they're finally able to, I guess, fight her to a standstill where Jurati herself kind of takes some control and kind of forms a pact with her, and then a pact with Seven and Raffi. And so it looks like the Borg stuff is mostly wrapped up. There might be some more threads that they'll weave into the finale with that. But as for Picard, we get the dark reveal of what exactly happened with his mom, and put a lot of that stuff to rest. And then the episode ends with Soong is still out there and is going to attempt to stop the Europa mission. Dave, I'm just going to give my opening statement first, and then I'll pick your brain on what your impressions were on this episode. But
Sure.
You're right. You did mention that this was a big episode, lots of happenings. You told me last night that this felt like a finale, or at least part one of a finale, and I think that's true. Back during the first half of this season, I was frequently talking about how much I enjoyed the pacing, and that the story had this energetic momentum. I kept calling it that purposeful pace. I think we all agree, though, that in the second half of the season, that pacing slowed down. And I think a lot of the audience became frustrated and even a bit bored in recent weeks with some of these episodes of Picard Season 2, just after being strung along for so long. And I get that. But I'm curious if this episode and next week's finale, if they'll be able to win some of the audience back over. Because there's definitely a lot going on here. I think this was maybe too much going on in one episode. It feels perhaps a little disjointed, but it does wrap some things up and moves the story closer to an ending. And a lot of it was stuff I liked. You know, the benevolent Borg Queen, that's something I've been talking about for years that I wanted, and I thought Picard would be a good show to do that, so I was happy to see that. The Picard trauma finally was fully explained, and I want to later on, we'll discuss more about how that kind of fits into the larger theme of the season, and specifically the history of the character of Picard. There is some neat actiony stuff, but also there is some dumb actiony stuff. A few plot points that also didn't feel particularly clever or well thought out, which made me a little sad because the season opened with some really strong writing, I thought, and the second half, it kind of meandered around and kind of lost focus, and I think lost some of the stuff I was, bragging about the show doing in those first couple of episodes. But despite those things, though, and I will mention some of my complaints more later, but there was some stuff that wasn't great. I am mostly on board this episode, though, and happy with all of the broad strokes. I know some stuff is going to be too dark for certain people, and we'll give a content warning before we talk about that. We're going to save the really dark stuff for the towards the end of the show. But yeah, just so you know, we'll give you a content warning before we start talking about it. But I was talking to my partner Antonia this morning about this episode, but before work, and she was actually talking to me about it, which normally I'll have to ask her how she felt about like a show or a movie or something and kind of probe around to get her opinions. And I like hearing her opinions on stuff. But if she's just like proactively just talking to me about something without prompt or anything, I know like, oh, it must have like, it left an impression that, she's just going to engage the conversation like that. And she agreed this episode, it was a little all over the place. And she even complained about that while watching it. But the message of the episode landed with her. And she described she described the episode as we have this trauma from our past sometimes that, you have these memories that we can only contextualize later on in life. And no matter how old or how successful you are, you can have these terrible incidents from as early as childhood that hang with you. And even someone like Jean-Luc Picard will still need to process them. And it probably, the episode probably had more of an impact with her and with me because we're both people who, our moms went into bad health and kind of deteriorated before our eyes and died fairly young. And, I admit that mother son stories are always near and dear to my heart. I mention that all the time on here. I love when Star Trek does stuff with, like Spock and Amanda, for example. But say what you will about season 2 of Picard, it does have a theme and it does have a message. And it also has, some dumb stuff in here that we're going to talk about. But, we know the people who make Star Trek work really hard and try really hard to make the best shows they can for us. And we love that they're making all these shows, and we know that they listen to the audience. And people from some of the shows have even interacted with us here on Tex-Trek. And, we're always going to be sure we let them know about, the things that we like in this modern golden age of Star Trek. But we also want to politely point out some of the things we don't like, and hopefully see if they can get better at some of that stuff in the future. But yeah, I mean, that's where I stand on this. Mostly good, but some complaints we'll get into. Dave, what about you?
I like to sometimes caustically point out the things I don't like. Now, I try to evaluate Star Trek Discovery and Picard, the two sort of current standard bearers of live action Trek, based on what they give us, and I try not to evaluate it too hard based on what I wish they had given us, and sometimes that's a little tricky. So I do felt like, and I've mentioned this throughout the whole thing, that they dragged out the mystery of Picard's flashbacks for too long. But if I sort of am allowing for the tropes of the show, their particular take on serial TV, and the way it works, then I thought it was a very moving episode at times. It had. It actually did end up sort of surprising me with the reveal about Picard's mother. And that was, the worst thing I think for me was just that it was going to be sort of exactly what it looked like. And they already sort of swerved a little bit an episode or two back by revealing that it wasn't about sort of his father as a sort of a monster. Seems flawed, but not monstrous. And then this episode had its big sort of shocker. And that actually surprised me. And then I was, I liked a decent bit about how they handled that. I think I was even more happy with the conversation between Jurati and the Borg Queen and how that played out. I did think that throughout the episode there was a few too many meaningful conversations had while they were either being hunted or Seven of Nine was bleeding out. So that was just one of those slight groaner tropes of the show, but. For me, at least in this episode, it kind of paid off. Like, I was very happy with what happened with Jurati and the Borg Queen. That to me, some people don't love that the Borg have kind of gotten less scary over the years, but I actually like that they've evolved as a threat, and I've liked sort of some of the little nooks and crannies that they've gone to, even in them. I like that their culture is has proven to be mutable, and that I love the idea that Starfleet might, through its influence, help change them for the better. That's almost like peak Trek kind of concepts, even if I might quibble with sort of how they got there in places. So I was really happy about that. Mostly like the Picard stuff. I thought that the action was a little toothless. It sort of seemed there to, as a background for the character moments. But yeah, by and large, this episode landed for me better than I expected it to. I'm sort of used to, maybe it's because I've sort of diminished, my expectations on the finales of current live action Trek. That's usually where they lose me a bit, but I was pretty on board this one. So that's my, at least my first thoughts on it.
Well, cool. Let's go ahead and get into our episode breakdown where we can talk about it in more detail. And we'll just start at the beginning and talk about that opening Borg siege of La Serena. And also, we start the whole subplot of like Picard having flashbacks to playing hide and seek as he's playing hide and seek for his life dramatically in the same house he grew up in. But yeah, we see Rios and Teresa and Ricardo. And I'm still like kind of unsure why he brought them to La Sirena, but it allowed them, I guess, to be here during the dramatic action when Queen Jurati takes her new Borg form from the armor of the dying Borg Queen, and then Picard and company also beam in. Dave, what did you think about this opening sequence?
Cosplayers owe the show a lot. For specifically, Alison Pill is owed a debt for this season for her red dress and her Borg Queen variant. So yeah, it's interesting. Very obviously, those the night vision, or not night vision, but the laser scopes on those assault rifles obviously mirrored the sort of little laser sight of the Borg in lots of classic, cat and mouse games that the Borg might do, in corridors. I thought. I anticipated when we talked about there being a showdown on the ship, I thought they were going to get back and it was going to be an Alamo-style fort sort of defense with, trying to keep the Borg off of the ship and them running around, setting up traps and defenses like, Home Alone on a starship. And it wasn't that. They kept to the house as sort of metaphor for the tangle of, the tangle of the maze became the tangle of Picard's mind. And I think that works pretty neatly. So they surprised me a little bit by not making it quite as obvious as I thought, having essentially the Borg get to it first. It is one of those things where the combat would go on to feel a little toothless to me. But I thought the premise was good, and as they've because I know how it plays out, because I know that I really liked the final stuff with the Borg Queen and Jurati, I retroactively, like when I was watching it, I was like, they're doing the Borg Queen thing. We knew they were going to do that. I sort of found it predictable, but I didn't quite see how it would play out, and that made me, because I liked how it played out, I retroactively like it more.
I like that we get to see the tables turn, where Jurati is now the ghost in the Queen's head. And, she's kind of getting revenge for, like, you were trying to take control of me, now I'm going to try to take control of you. But it also allowed the Borg Queen actor, Annie Wershing, to, be on set and be Borged up. Because then when we see, like, inside of her mind, she's the one standing there as the Queen, and then Alison Pills is, like, herself talking to her. When it's all actually happening within Alison Pills' body, within her mind. But just the visual representation to the audience, we actually get to see Annie Wershing as the Queen.
It's generally a good idea, like, in those kind of things, to kind of have even the visual representation change a bit over time. To reflect the changing status of their relationship, I guess I'd say. So I think that was, good job on the part of both the cinematographer, but also just directing and, all the conceptual designers on it. I think that was a good showcase, sense of evolution.
I ain't gonna lie, though, I do kind of miss the red dress.
I mean, it's absence will make the heart grow fonder.
But we get the return of Elnor as a hollow Elnor, as the hologram, which felt a little weird to me, that this ship just scans the brains of everyone on it and then can recreate them as a hologram. But it is the alternate timeline Confederation La Sirena, so you can justify it a little bit that way, but it's still, like, super weird.
Do they scan the brains, or is it more like they just take your a portrait of your history? Like,
it knew what was in his mind when he died.
But I thought that was just like the writers being kind of a little bit lame. And, Leia Brahms, isn't that her name? Like, yeah. It had a pretty good sense of her, not perfect, obviously, but pretty good sense of her based on Geordi's description. And at times they've made out that, they can recreate these historical figures really well. And, they didn't scan their minds necessarily. It takes all the best stuff and tries to create an algorithm that represents them. And I think that was, like, even up to and including, the death, I guess. I think they used it as a convenience, but anyway, I don't know that it necessarily.
But it is all Confederation technology, so
sure.
You can, even if it doesn't make a ton of sense, at least you can be like, well, yeah, it's different than how Federation tech would work.
You'd expect them to be more invasive, yeah.
But I'm glad that they got to give even Evagora some action here. He actually is doing all his own stunts this season on Picard. And I've decided that I actually do wish that he had just been alive the whole season and had been like running around in modern day Earth with the rest of them. But for whatever reason, they chose not to do that. When Jurati first arrived on the ship and was going to the morgue and is just, walking through there naked and opens up the tube that had the Queen's dead body, I thought she was actually going to Elnor's corpse. It's like, oh no, she's gonna like resurrect Elnor as a Borg minion.
That'd be pretty scary.
But no, he gets to be the hero. Or they could have done that. They could have like Borg Elnor versus hologram Elnor.
I've assumed from the beginning that Elnor will return. I think he probably still will. But the fact that he returned as a hologram makes that a little bit more shaky. So now I'm not quite so sure. He did get his big sort of Deus Ex Machina ass-kicking, but he... does that mean that we won't see, Elnor do that? We won't see the return of Elnor?
I'm very confident if he's in season 3 at all, it'll be less than he's in season 2. But we'll find out in season 3, I guess.
I'm sure that among the reasons for him dying is, well, they didn't. It means that they don't have a physically formidable hand-to-hand combatant. There's yes, Seven and Jurati and not Jurati, but Raffi. Rios, any of those people have some pretty good basic combat training, but not on his level. And so that meant, the world of the 21st century is a little scarier. And, of course, he plugs into Raffi's story. They wanted to do Raffi's story.
Well, what do you think, speaking of combat abilities, when Talon shows up? I thought she looked kind of cool, shooting the pulse cannon-y gun, except, here's a nitpick here. Those are the Zot Vash weapons from season 1. So why does she have those in the 21st century? That seemed weird to me.
Oops.
It's the end of the season and we spent all of our budget, so you just tell the prop department to use what they already got. I mean, I know that's the real life answer, but it is kind of annoying to notice that.
I kind of like Cake is Eternal's comment that Elnor's hologram Elnor could have said, "What's the nature of your combat emergency?"
Yeah, that would have been fun because he is the emergency combat hologram, which we hadn't seen before. Yeah, at first I thought it was going to be Emmett, the hologram, or not. Emmett's the one who speaks Spanish. Yeah, I thought it was going to be Emmett that we saw in the first episode of the season, and he was in season 1 also.
Right.
The tactical
now
hologram.
that we see that, and now that we know this, that makes sense as a little reminder. It basically set up the notion of a combat hologram to remind us of that. So it wasn't completely Deus Ex Machina as it happens.
But we get Rios and the civilians beamed out of danger. They're sent to Talus's apartment, and they're kind of here's where they're kind of like held up, like the Alamo, like they're in the chateau when the Borg are invading. Should we get into the? I guess the stuff.
I want to before we go there. I want to just quick mention. What do we think about Jurati's notion of what did she hide in Elnor? What was it? The subroutine
the key,
or something?
Yeah, she locked
the car
out
keys basically.
She locked out the controls to La Serena, and so you have to get Elnor's the one who has them, and he's running around as actually they added a little mobile emitter like Star Trek Voyager.
That was kind of neat. I was kind of thinking if you can, I don't know, lock somebody out. Is there a way to maybe not put it in a person that can be caught? Maybe just diffuse the information.
Well, she had to put it into something that they'd be able to get it back from too.
Yeah, I know, but I just figured you could put in some code and recall it or something. I don't know.
But she needed it to be something that she didn't have access to, because if she had it, then the Queen would be able to read her mind.
Right. She wanted having it inside something AI.
Yeah, it needed a trustworthy party to carry it.
Yeah,
But the mobile emitter thing annoyed me at first because that's supposed to be 29th century technology. Why do they have this? But then I was like, well, it makes sense if he's got to be separate from the ship's computer. Then he shouldn't be on those holoprojectors. He needs to be on his own. And maybe the Confederation, maybe they encountered a 29th century time cop and killed them and took the mobile emitter. I mean, Janeway in our timeline bested the Braxton, the 29th century time cop. So I guess evil Confederation Janeway did the same thing and took the technology there. I didn't realize that. Yeah, that is a little bit of a plot hole.
You know, there's various things that people have thought that they spotted, like, wait a minute, they didn't have transporter technology in the 21st century, and I'm like, okay, yeah, humans didn't. Like,
Yeah.
there's been some definite mistakes on the fandom's part where they're conflating storylines or forgetting storylines.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one where the writers seem
No,
to have
I don't
like,
think so, because it's all Confederation timeline stuff.
like it looks exactly like it did on Voyager, right? Pretty much
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm assuming it still came from the 29th century, but just
Yeah.
if the Voyager crew can get that technology, then why wouldn't the Voyager crew of the Confederation be able to get it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I guess it works. Yeah, like certainly, I don't want explanations of like every little thing. But maybe it wouldn't have been hurt if somebody had been line like, turns out, like if Jurati had said, after he's running around and kicking some ass, like after his big appearance, he just said, pretty cool. Turns out one lucky thing, the Confederation figured out mobile hologram emitters too.
Oh, Trek Yards is in our live audience. I don't know if that's the captain or the commander, but let us know. Is the steward or Samuel who's talking to us? But they're talking about the 29th century Confederation time cops, proving it's alternate reality. It's not a time travel story. It's all alt universe. Well, they actually did specify that in the second episode of the season. They have PICARD say, like, this is our timeline, just altered.
Right.
But, the one other thing, I guess, here in this opening with the Queen and Jurati, they do kind of explain why the Queen hasn't just, like, purged Jurati from her mind. I guess she would have had the ability to do that, but there's a line of dialogue there that the Queen won't just kill Jurati's consciousness because she's lonely. So I guess she doesn't get into the minds of these other drones she's assimilated. I guess they're just, walking zombies. It would kind of make sense if these are like very primitive nanoprobes. They might not have like the full-on assimilation that she would have in the future. But she needs Jurati just to maintain that connection to someone.
And they've clearly had like a closer relationship, having to cut deals with each other and converse throughout the whole season. That is one case where the sort of the serial format, I think, has worked for them. We've seen their sort of relationship grow, occasionally require them to work together, but often be at odds. But at the very least, they've spent a lot of time together.
Well, let's talk about the stuff with Soong when he steps onto the very blue screen looking battlefield. I'm pretty sure that they shot that on a soundstage somewhere, and
would have been funny if Raffi
but
just capped him when he started talking.
I kind of wouldn't have blamed her. He does get like a little annoying. I think Brent Spiner's performance here, he is menacing at times, but he also hams it up a little too much, in my opinion.
They clearly wanted to give him some the ability to do that, and I think they wanted to make sure that we weren't like feeling sorry for him too much. He kind of burned his bridges with his clone daughter. He hasn't particularly been sympathetic during the season, but at times you can almost see like he's like verging on like a human connection to her. And I guess by being extra villainous, A, it lets Brent Spiner kind of camp it up a bit, and B, it makes sure that we don't have too much sympathy for this guy when maybe he gets blown up. I don't know. We'll find out.
He does probably annoy me more than anything else in this episode this week. Like here, he has kind of a pointless. It's kind of a pointless scene at the beginning where he just tells PICARD like, "Oh, you should surrender," and PICARD's like, "No, fuck you," and then I guess he just provides a face and a voice to the soldiers, the Borg soldiers that are going to be chasing PICARD in this cat and mouse hide and seek game. But other than that, he doesn't really do anything meaningful.
Yeah, well, if we liken this a little bit to broadly how Trek movies tend to go, not just the Kelvin ones, but really all of them, they always want a face to their evil. They want a bad guy to get punched. And I don't know if we're going to get to see him get punched per se, but he's definitely the stamp of it more than, say, Q is. Q is sort of the puppet master, but we can't quite puzzle out everything on him. Soong is pretty bald-facedly egomaniacal and a piece of shit.
But yeah, basically they decide to split up. Raffi and Seven are going to go one way. Picard and Talon are going to go another way, and they're going to try to retake the ship. They just have to escape the soldiers and escape the chateau. And Picard starts having these memories of his parents, of his childhood, of calling his dad a curmudgeon. I did like seeing Maurice Picard again, played by James Callis. He's not in here much, but the little bit he's in here I like.
Hey, look, it's Bashir. Oh, wait.
No, they're not the same person.
Sorry, I just stuck on that.
But I liked his, when they're like celebrating, oh, it's a nice day outside, and he's just like, wars have been fought on lovely days. Just, he has a curmudgeon, but I kind of get it. And when he's telling Picard,
I feel like their brand of curmudgeonliness on him is a little over the top, because he did that he's like, there's 1,000 ways to die or whatever, and I was like, all right, even he
was trying to tell his kid to stay out of those tunnels. He's like, there's 1,000 ways to die down there.
It's a little overly morose, even for a guy who's kind of a d-bag. I don't know.
But they do add some depth to him in these.
They do
in these episodes,
for sure. I thought that, and we can talk about it maybe a little bit more as we get deeper. I did have a question of kind of his treatment of the mom and exactly what he was trying to do with the lockup situation and how much that makes him sort of culpable, how poorly he was treating her. It's kind of hard to tell in some cases.
Yeah, I don't think he was actually treating her bad unless, maybe he should have forced her to get more medical help. Because they said that the mom denied any treatment. She didn't want to go to the doctor. She didn't want any treatment or anything, which I think is kind of that might be questionable if people would behave that way in, Roddenberry's future. Wouldn't we be more accepting of things like modern therapy and modern medicine, right, and stuff?
But if you happen to be have a particular stripe of mental illness that's pretty, a little bit more extreme, well, it could be that the illness itself prevents you from calling for help. And that's an interesting ethical question. Do you force help on somebody if
Sure.
that person is, say, schizophrenic and sees you as not actually doesn't see you as you are, doesn't perceive reality quite like that? There's certainly room for kind of a conversation about it.
But sorry, my dog.
I hear
is
a Klingon targ.
Right Dave, why don't you tell us any other thoughts you might have on this?
Let's see. Okay, so Father is off getting his pupper. I sort of I felt for Picard with his mom sort of vacillating between being very supportive and in all the past episodes we'd seen, she'd been almost like an ideal sort of mom in a lot of ways, or at least that's how she was presented. And now we see this colder side of her that could kind of turn melancholy and is in her own way as morose as his dad. It's interesting that hers is cited as mental illness, but he's just a curmudgeon. That might be something to think about. But yeah, I sort of I felt for him getting kind of ping-ponged between those two different poles. Not sure whether she was there to support him or whether she might be bringing him down in a way a young mind really can't kind of understand. So. Yeah, I don't know.
One of the things that I think is interesting is that they might have moved out to the vineyard for Yvette, maybe to benefit her fits of depression or delusions or whatever she was having. Because we see Maurice, talk to her here where he's like, you've been doing much better. To me, I read it as he's kind of trying to be supportive.
Yeah.
And they said in the first episode of the season, when we first see these flashbacks, they mention, Paris is just a quick transport away, or, we're not that far. So they just recently moved out to the chateau. Maybe Maurice's dad or uncle died, and so they're going to go take over the family vineyard or something. But maybe they were doing it because of Yvette and her mental illness. And the other thing that stood out to me here was when he was saying, Picard, he's like, oh, he's a brilliant little man, but he has too much time on his hands or whatever. I just remember I guess growing up out in the country, that's a thing where I remember if I was, watching watching Star Trek as a little kid, or building Star Trek models, or you're reading comics, or playing video games. As older people in my family, like my grandparents or someone, they'd be like, "This kid has too much time on his hands. He needs to like go do like some work. He needs to like be outside working or something."
You got time to lean, you got time to clean. Son of a bitch.
Yeah, I just hadn't thought of people saying that in a long time, but then I remembered it when I was watching this.
There is, I almost wish that at some point they had this conversation about Picard, because a lot of times like he talks fairly nostalgically about his kind of old world family. I think, and it'd be interesting to him to
does
hear.
he? It always seemed like there was a bit of a divide where
I mean, I guess so. I guess I'm thinking of like sort of in generations where he's picturing his ideal holiday would be, and it's firmly entrenched in that old world, a borderline Victorian
but
style.
that was when he was depressed because his brother and nephew had just burnt to death. And that part of his identity was basically ripped away from him overnight, just in a house fire. And so I think that would probably justify him clinging to that more than he typically would.
But has he ever like talked at length with like, I'm trying to think like Guinan or Riker about like his family, like on that level of like their kind of, this got mentioned in the comments, them being kind of Luddites, them being old world kind of country farmers. Like, did he specifically talk about them?
If he said anything, it was normally about like he was the first one to leave the solar system, and everyone else, they didn't have interest in things like going off to join Starfleet or exploring, but he, wanted to see the stars, and now we see like that inspiration came from his mom, and it even says later in the episode, as a kid he always thought of her as being inspired, and that passed on to him. And the hide and seek games that they're playing, it comes into play here when she's trying to make her escape, but he doesn't know what's going on, and she's telling him, "Oh, don't worry, come down in the tunnels. It's all just a game. It's all just hide and seek." And how do you feel about like there being like these secret World War II French resistance spy passageways, and kind of like Bat Cave secret entrances and stuff in the chateau? Is that too silly for Star Trek, or does it work?
I mean, the fact that those things at least do exist, there's
Right.
places that have that, means that I think it works within the narrative, and I think it's kind of a neat metaphor. They're not real subtle about the maze reflecting his own confusion as it has from the beginning, but I kind of liked it. I thought it was a cool idea.
Yeah, I had to toss it around a bit in my head, but I ended up deciding I liked it because of the World War II explanation. That they actually did have a lot of like weird stuff like this, and they mentioned it a little bit more. I don't know if you recall, Dave, but in an earlier episode when they mentioned that this chateau was occupied by the Nazis, and the Picard family was driven out and driven to England. Mm-hmm. I was questioning, like, why did the Nazis do that? I don't think like Picard's Jewish or anything. I even speculated maybe his family had ties to the resistance and they had to flee, and they get that confirmed here. So I liked that, and we get more flashback stuff with his mom in this line of dialogue. She says, "When you remember me, Jean-Luc, promise me you will ignore the coldness of a dying star and remember instead her light and the infinite love she so very much had for you." That was one of the things that Antonia said, resonated with her, because when she saw her mom get sick and finally die, that was something like her mom told her something similar, like, "Don't remember me like this. Remember me when I was like healthy," and the good times. And a couple episodes ago, the episode Monster, that opens with the weird dream where he's talking to his dad as a therapist, and we see like that burning star outside of a ship's window, and he was actually doodling a picture of a star in his little art book that he drops on the stairs, and that's how his dad figures out they ran down into the tunnels. But the star thing, that was all about like his mom, about like remembering his mom as like this star, and it's even like it's like a red star, so it's like a star that is like towards like the later stages of its life, but still able to burn bright. So I guess we have finally some clarification on what that symbolism is.
Yeah, no, that sort of works. I'd be interested to hear, like, have they talked about that in the Ready Room?
They didn't. If you watch this week's Ready Room, they talk a lot about Strange New Worlds actually, and show some clips and stuff from that, which I
Makes sense.
not looking at because I don't want to see too much before I can actually sit down and watch the episode. But I heard it. I was in a different room away from my phone. It was playing on, and I heard it. But yeah, they didn't really talk about this type of stuff too much.
Well, that's too bad. I'd actually like to hear a little bit of behind the scenes on the episode, or maybe after this, I would like some reflections from the writers on some of that stuff.
It might be kind of corny, but I actually liked the moment when Picard is digging through all those boxes and he finds the old World War II gun and he starts busting some caps at Soong. That was probably just Patrick Stewart saying, like, I want to shoot a gun. I want to do like some action stuff here. I don't get to do any action anymore. But yeah, I think it was a Walter P-38. It might have been a Luger, but I'm pretty sure it was a P-38, a German gun. But I thought that was cool.
Any gun I see that looks vaguely German, I'm like, oh, that's a Luger. But I don't know. Yeah, I couldn't quite tell. Was it completely ineffective? Did it do anything?
He didn't hit anybody, I don't think.
I thought he tagged one of those guys, but their armor shrugged it off or something like that. Yeah. But I guess at the very least it kept him at bay for a few seconds while they kind of snuck off.
I mean, I picture these guys as being kind of zombie-like. Like they're probably not going to respond to any pain or anything.
Right. They might get a shot and just keep ticking.
But do you have anything else on Picard and Talon running through the hide and seek tunnels of his youth?
Only kind of what I hinted at or mentioned before, which is that them occasionally pausing to have his dramatic reveals, or it was maybe more Seven and Raffi that I was vitally aware of it, where like they carefully avoid being some laser sights, and then they'd start talking about their relationship or something, and I was like, doesn't seem like a great time.
When Picard is like, remarkable, I only saw this once, and that was through the eyes of a child, and Talon should have been like, why are you standing here reflecting on that? We need to run. Let's go.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like it's almost like the writers know the characters aren't in danger. This is just a menacing situation to heighten the drama, but had kind of forgotten that they need to at least give the audience the illusion of its threat, of its menace. And maybe if they were a little bit more, hunkered down under cover, somebody said something like, I think we got separated from them. I think we're okay. And then they say it, just a little bit more of a sense that they were definitely out of danger at times, at least for a few minutes.
Well, it looks like people in our audience are also not very impressed with Soong. Jill47 says, I really thought that the Soong thing was going to be important. Is it done now? And Linda Marks is saying, I honestly don't care about Soong at all. No offense to Brent.
Well, we know that there's one big mystery remaining, and that's the kind of like the cryptic words of the Borg Queen, who's all riddles this season.
Yeah, it was annoying. Like, I don't know. did she watch the new Batman movie and like wanted to talk like the Riddler or something? Like,
Tell Picard that there are 9 rings for the Elven Kings, 7 for the Dwarf Lords. What? But that does mean that Soong has some role to play. They showed him in the previously on here talking about his ability to sort of unite or divide the Federation. That he was that crux to the future. And the exact nature of like what Renee will or won't discover, what the 2 Renees thing means from her cryptic words. I think he will still have a role to play. I don't know if it'll be satisfying, but it will be there.
I have some thoughts on that, but I'll wait till the end. We kind of end on a little bit of a setup for the next week's episode. But let's talk about
Hang on, one last thing. Jill's last comment. I'm sort of aware of that in that space. I thought Noonien Soong was okay.
Oh, okay.
Just
that was
until I find out more.
Was he the best? Noonien's the one in the 24th century who made Data. So is he the best?
Okay. This was part of their other conversation about the lineage of it. Okay.
Well, Dave, I've heard you mention in previous episodes that you felt that like there wasn't a sense of menace or like dread, like racing against the clock, or there's like immediate danger, I guess. But I
Yeah.
think we kind of get that here with the green lasers that are sweeping around all the time. I thought that kind of added a little bit of tension. But
It kind of immediately is, but I don't know. Don't you think that they like didn't seem that threatening? Like I don't. Did anybody? Oh, okay, so Rios got shot, and they did use it to get him out.
Rios got shot, and then Seven and Raffi, they actually like get in a fight with that guy, and I guess they lose their guns and have to stab him with a knife. Because then after that, they're like, we don't have any guns. We just have an ice pick and a corkscrew. And
You know, in what was it? One of the better Bond movies in recent years. What was the one where he goes to his old home?
Skyfall.
Skyfall.
This is very Skyfall-ish.
Very Skyfall-ish,
but without the
like,
Home Alone elements. They didn't have the prep
higher,
time.
The threat was higher there, and I wish it had a little Skyfall to it, I guess I'd say. Which usually requires somebody has to die. And, I didn't particularly want them to kill anybody off.
You wanted it to be Ricardo, didn't you? Little Ricardo.
If it had to be somebody, he could say something cute right before he's like, "Oh, an explosion!" No, if Rios, as soon as he was beamed out, he was treating that like the old hero's wound, like he doesn't even notice it. And like if I would have cared more about these guys if it had looked kind of bad, if the special effects guys had done some work to make the injury look pretty bad, have him fighting through it, still determined to get back and help them. She gives him an adrenaline shot to keep him going, something like that. But like, I think that would have given me the immediacy of like, oh yeah, okay, these guys could hurt you bad. If that had hit someplace else, they'd die. I never felt that threat, unfortunately, even though they were trying to convey it.
What about Seven of Nine's backstory? She talks about very briefly about how she did try to join Starfleet after Voyager, and Starfleet wouldn't take her, and she eventually just walked and joined the Fenris Rangers.
No, I thought it's sort of everybody is kind of trying to find their home in this, their connection, and it's a good example of sort of how you can sort of, I guess, flail around. Like maybe the Fenris Rangers, I don't believe in destiny, but maybe that works as a possible destiny for her. But yeah, it shows the immediate consequence of the kind of the long-standing enmity that Jurati is trying to get past. She does mention, like, candidly, what, millions of worlds taken by the Borg? Man, you think the Empire is bad in Star Wars. Psh, ain't got nothing on this.
The Borg have been around for a long time. They've done a lot of
the worst
damage.
of the worst war crimes. The fact that they're in some kind of clinical way, they're sort of humane about it. They just assimilate you. They don't torture you, starve you, put you in a labor camp or whatever. I guess that maybe aid in the healing, but I can see a galaxy that would be like, yeah, no forgiveness. How about no?
Yeah, that's something. I know you haven't seen some of the later seasons of Voyager. But that's something that Seven encounters a lot in the Delta Quadrant with a lot of people they run into. They'll just be like, "Fuck you, Janeway! You have a Borg on your ship. Get out of our system." So she faced that in the Delta Quadrant, and when she made it back to Earth, which probably made it sting more. She's probably hoping the Federation would be more welcoming. But I do kind of get how that would happen in the post-Borg, post-Dominion, Starfleet, Wolf 359, we have people like Ben Sisko who like lost their spouse and stuff like that. You also have the Tal Shiar has started infiltrating Starfleet, and you have like that more like hawkish militarized version of Starfleet. And I would love to see this explored in another story. I'd like it to be in something canon, but even if they just like touch this in a novel or something at some point, I think it'd be like a really interesting story to explore and see all the details. We know they let Icheb into Starfleet. Didn't work out great for him, but he was an ex-Borg. He got into Starfleet, but he was also in Voyager. You see him like do like academy training stuff, like kind of like how Wesley was like an acting ensign on some early Next Generation episodes. So you see like Icheb kind of doing that and kind of like going like the Starfleet Academy route, but with Seven, I mean, she'd be qualified when they made it back to Earth after Voyager. She'd be qualified. Like, she should be able to, like, enter Starfleet as an officer. And I could see them, really, like, pushing back against that. And, we don't know if we can trust you. You spent most of your life in the collective and stuff. And, yeah, maybe Janeway could throw some weight around and maybe,
Didn't she say that she said Janeway did try to?
Yeah, she threatened to resign. And I could see, Janeway actually, hammering out a deal. But at 7, at that point, might have just been like, no, like, y'all have shown your true colors. Like, no, I'm gonna walk away from this. I don't want this anymore. I'm gonna go be a Fenris Ranger and an alcoholic and be drinking whiskey out of the bottle in season 1 of Picard.
Do you think that Linda Marks was wondering if in our audience if Raffi's questions or comment that she should be a captain was foreshadowing? Do you think that this series or this season will, or maybe next season will go to that place, Fathery?
I don't know. I hadn't thought about that, but that is possible. I do think it's a little weird that
I think it is. I think it is foreshadowing.
I think it's weird that Seven and Raffi have been in this relationship for like a year, and the story had never come up before.
That's true. But I could kind of see it in the sense that maybe it almost came up and Seven was sensitive about it.
She's very private, yeah.
And Raffi backed off.
Yeah, well, Seven seems to be the one with, kind of the commitment issues, and it's probably like more closed off and more private.
Right.
What I also thought was weird was when they're like, oh yeah, there's no way we're going to survive this, right? I mean, like, we don't have any guns. We just have a knife, a corkscrew, and an ice pick. We have to run 50 yards across all this machine gun fire to get to La Serena. No way we're going to survive. And then there's just like one CGI shot of them running across a field, and they make it there somehow.
Yeah, that would have been a place to like kind of put all your suspense work of the episode into it. Dangerous dodges. Take out like a little small group of gunners that were by flanking them or pulling some risky maneuver. That would have probably been the place to do it, because they're talking like Butch and Sundance style. This is the end.
But, that was where it kind of felt like, oh, yeah, we're at the end of the season. They were probably running out of budget. They probably had to rewrite a lot of stuff these last few episodes. And this is the final result. So that's what we get. And it was kind of corny when they first start running across, like, this field. You see, like, the first guy they run up to. And there's the CGI shot, like, one of them, like, just, like, slashing a knife at his throat. And you hear, like, this really schlocky, just, like, sound effect of a throat being cut open. I don't know.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I kind of like rolled my eyes at that.
They need to bring in expert throat cutter Christopher Lee, who I guess mentioned that in filming Lord of the Rings. He's like,
oh yeah, he told Peter Jackson, he's like, I know the sound of a man who had his throat cut. Christopher Lee, speaking of like spy stuff in World War II, if we can go on a small tangent, but yeah, the actor Christopher Lee, he was an operative in the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare in World War II and did like spy special ops stuff.
Truly a cool name,
But let's talk about Hollow Elnor on La Serena and the retaking of La Serena. Did you catch the Pulp Fiction homage? The Elnor going through like the phaser pistols and the phaser rifle, and then he gets the samurai sword and he says hello.
I didn't love it. Usually I don't want my homages to just be the scene. I'd rather
it was the exact same I guess it's not the exact same thing, but yeah, it's virtually identical.
Yeah, it's I kind of see why they did it. It's a fun enough idea. I won't dock him a point for it or anything, but yeah, it was a little. I actually groaned like just a little bit.
But again, it was fun seeing Evan Evagora, run around, do action stuff. He's very good. He's in real life he's an athlete. He's MMA fighter. I think he's done like boxing. He's doing his own stunt work, and
I forgot he was MMA stuff. Okay.
Or some form of martial arts. But we do get the reunion between him and Raffi. I did like that she got like the solace when he tells her, Elnor didn't die upset or angry or anything. He died loving you, and that probably helps her forgive herself and relieve herself of some of the blame. And Seven is able to beam all the Borg. I guess they all get beamed into walls and stuff, and that's how they defeat all the Borg except for the Queen. because she had the inhibitor.
Picard took that pretty easily. I remember thinking that every once in a while they've shown Federation people or Starfleet people to be a little too okay with kind of weird levels of violence. I remember when Elnor chopped those people up, and Raffi was just like, show off. I'm like, all right, but like also maybe a little bit like, my God, you know. And this is pretty disturbing. Not since Star Trek: The Motion Picture have people been beamed so badly.
Yeah, I mean, you have to assume that like these Borg, they're all like lost cause. Like they're like for whatever reason, like this primitive assimilation on them, it's like irreversible. They're just like they're already dead.
I always want. I think I want Picard to be kind of express a certain Starfleet level of mercy there.
No, not with Borg. He hates Borg. He wouldn't do it with them. Maybe with someone else.
But if he had said like he's like the poor souls they harvested for Borg didn't deserve that. But at least, you know, now they no longer have to live out that nightmarish existence.
I'm more concerned with the butterflies than with like okay, they're okay with killing Borg zombies. I'm fine with that. But like the timeline stuff.
Are you really? Like, because at this point, like no Star Trek almost ever takes butterflies seriously.
I mean, this
to the point where like I almost
drastic though. Like.
Sure,
they're killing people who would have been alive otherwise. I
can only look at it from a meta perspective, which is to say they always ignore it.
They don't always ignore it though. They like when have they ever gone back in time and killed people before? Like that's a pretty drastic change to the timeline.
I mean, I just feel like they must have just like bumped stuff all over the place in First Contact by their actions.
It never shows anyone die. Like
didn't the Borg attack the encampment?
The Borg blow some buildings up, but we don't see like anyone die.
I bet they killed some people.
I mean, maybe, but if so, they never like shine a light on it. But the fact that
but they're not going to shine a light on it.
But the fact that like there's going to be like skeletons in these walls. Like Picard doesn't like. Oh, I remember seeing these as a kid. I always wondered how they got there. Like there's like Borg technology within these things, just sitting there in these walls. That's weird to me. I'm just gonna assume that all these soldiers, all these mercenaries, they're just gonna die in a few years in World War III, anyways. So that kind of helps things a little bit. But yeah, they're just it just seems like they're getting more fast and loose with the timeline stuff than
aren't
they
going to
like previous
undo?
Episodes.
They almost have to undo something and like alter the timeline. I don't know quite how that'll work. These events have occurred, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe he's like we'll beam him out later.
Q can always snap his fingers in the next episode and fix all of this. So if he's
got the power to do that, yeah. But yeah, otherwise they can beam some rubble onto the La Serena, and the people will just be like, oh, looks like the walls must have collapsed from wear and tear. We'll have to build that up next time we're fixing it up.
You know what would have made a lot more sense is if Seven just beamed all of these people into low orbit and they would just burn up in re-entry and it would destroy all the evidence.
These are also violent, such weirdly violent talk for Star Trek.
I don't think it's weirdly violent.
I wish they had beamed them to the bottom of the sea and we could watch them drown.
It's not, Star Trek's not Doctor Who. Like sometimes you have to,
No, I know.
You have to put a gas tracking torpedo up General Chang's ass and blow up his bird of prey. Like they shoot people, they blow up people. They don't celebrate it, but I mean that's part of.
Is La Serena at full power? Hasn't there been like a drain on power, transporters in particular?
Haven't mentioned that in a while, but yeah, some of the early episodes. I think all that stuff's been repaired at this point.
This is all just headcanon stuff anyway. I'm sure they just did it because they wanted to keep the sets the action contained. Yeah, like if you just wanted to say like, oh, they could only beam them someplace within a space of a mile, and so it's like, oh, okay, there you go.
But I did like Picard's reaction where it's like, oh, we seem to be gaining the advantage or something like that. But yeah, my idea like beaming people
a little cold to me.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to just disagree with you on that because it's if these people are like already dead, I don't think there would be a problem with dispatching them like this.
You think you should have laughed wildly?
No.
In your face, Borg. That's what you get.
I mean, I think they were like the intent was that they're basically just like walking robots.
He's processed a lot of his Borg bitterness. I don't know. I would have liked for him to say something about like that being a particularly seemingly horrible fate, but but yes, we do seem to be, and then he could be like, but we do seem to be gaining the advantage. Um, that's me.
Let's talk about the boss fight with the Borg Queen.
Hmm.
When she comes in with the she has like a stick or a club or something to fight Elnor with.
Oh yeah, yeah. I couldn't. I don't know what she had there. Was it some tool?
Sorry, my dog's being loud again.
Valerie, would you throw up in a minute Jill's comment on the the wine effect of, of the
The wine
Borg
tastes strangely
beamings?
metallic this year. I guess there's some Borg nanoprobes beamed into them.
Yeah, yeah. Oops, we accidentally. That's how people get assimilated later on. They just drink some wine and you start getting assimilated.
But yeah, so the boss fight, they get the queen cornered, and then she busts out the tentacles and disables Eleanor's emitter, stabs Seven, pushes Raffi to the other side of the ship. And so with Seven about to die, with the queen about to kill her, that's when Jurati takes control and has like that speech that Dave, you mentioned that you liked, you bought into this.
Yeah, I did. I did. I'd seen it, called a little bit trite in other places, but um, it's kind of like how I came to learn to work with the Kelvin movies. When I take them on their own merits and accept that they're going to be kind of anarchic, stories about rebels trying to do the right thing, and like I kind of enjoy them. And in this case, I'm like, I know that I wasn't going to quite get level, writing on the level of like the Drumhead or one of the great episodes of Trek or City on the Edge of Forever, quite up there. So but within the what they've been doing on the show, I thought it was pretty good. And again, I like the idea of moving the Borg forward. I think that if they were always basically the Terminator is very scary, but as we have seen with those movies, it is diminishing returns. That first movie, just terrifying. The second movie, basically a remake of the first movie. Everything after that, it was all like, yeah, that's a Terminator. Oh yeah, they take over the world, I guess. It's very hard to keep up that sense of menace and yet also not have them win. So if you're going to have them lose quite a bit of the time, then you have to change the nature of the threat. And I would like that. I like them doing a very Star Trek-y thing, and kind of like the X-Men tend to do over time. Their enemies become their allies.
I fucking loved this so much. This is one of the best things I've seen on Star Trek this year so far, which is a lot because we've had like we get a lot of Star Trek every year. But yeah, probably like I don't know, I have to think about like in the last couple of years, but this is something like I had been hoping for. If you go back and listen to Dave and I talk about the season 1 of Picard episode Nepenthe way back in early 2020, 2 years ago, when Seven takes over the Borg cube temporarily and gets
Hmm.
control of all the drones. I talked about it there, how like wouldn't it be cool if we could have like a Borg queen who wants to be good and use Borg for a source of good. I think there's so much potential there. I think that the idea of like they could be a collective, they go and they take people who like need saving, who want to join this collective, maybe they're in bad health, maybe they're dying, maybe they've been rejected by society and want to be part of something else,
It's a
but they
lot of
would
outcasts.
it'd be a collective of people who choose to be in it. They would fight for something that they willingly accept membership in, that they would celebrate the uniqueness. It would really be infinite diversity and infinite combinations, and they would be friends of the Federation. And the notion that the Borg just being these conquering assholes are going to assimilate everyone no matter what, that is a losing formula, and that is a recipe for defeat. And it in multiple timelines they are defeated. So instead of trying
Yep.
to conquer everyone, it's time to stop being an asshole and start being a friend. And that's the way to live long and prosper. And I love that. I love way back
So
in
go ahead, Father.
well, I was just gonna say it's the same legacy as what we saw way back in the original series when the Organians tell Kirk and Kor, when he says, one day the Klingons will be good guys and they'll be your allies. They'll be friends of the Federation. And Kor and Kirk, kind of balk at that, but it happened, and I think people have enjoyed seeing that storyline play out. So yeah, I think it is very much in the Star Trek tradition. If the Borg are just going to continue to exist to be like this ultimate evil force that can't be reasoned with, I mean, that to me, that's not Star Trek.
I agree. I'm with you here, and that's why this scene was more important to me in ways than Picard's personal revelations. I do want to quick acknowledge Stress Free K in the comments says, "Who wants to be a Borg?" Like, why would you, what are you going to go and be basically an emotionless robot for? And I think, first of all, I think it would this different approach would change the essential nature of what it means to be a Borg, for one thing. But I also think that they've commented on this here and in other cases that there's a sort of a sense of connectiveness when you're with the Borg, that like that alone, I think is clearly something that Jurati experienced, that Chakotay has experienced. That's it's part of their backstory, and I think it's that connectiveness would be hugely appealing.
Yeah. And something that Seven has to deal with, like losing in Voyager. They spend a lot of time talking about like her losing that.
Sure.
I don't think that's something for everyone. I know, like if I was like on my deathbed and it's like, well, you could die and rest in peace, or you could be assimilated into this collective and have your thoughts and consciousness be connected to all these other beings and like live on forever in this collective. I would probably choose that. I would choose Borgdom. It's
hard for us to truly, I think, imagine what it would be like to be a hive mind. Like we don't experience that. It's hard to wrap your head around. But it's also like the Borg feel like, oh, well, you're basically just a part of a machine, right? You are 7 of 9. You're a bolt in a giant engine, and again, I do think that would change. I think that probably part of what Jurati is imagining is something like that changing, that free will becomes more of a thing in there, that they embrace, that losing the conqueror aspect would make it that more appealing. But also, to some degree, Borg they all seem to, when they're ripped from it, miss it to some degree. And realize that there was something about it that felt good to be part of something that worked.
Earl Grey Trekkie, our friend Robbie, mentioned in the comments earlier about 7 of 9's implants coming back after she gets assimilated. And yeah, that was weird to me. It's like, how would her implants be like exactly like where they were before? When this isn't even like the same 7 body that would have like some type of like memory of that. This is like the Confederation 7 that was never assimilated, that was president of the Confederation. Did like the Borg Queen like intentionally like
there is a style. Agnes... Father, there's a style guide to Borging someone up, and she always her physical body suggested
as a Borg.
That.
This is what she looked like after the Voyager Doctor tried to de-Borgify her.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's like a narrative cheat a little bit.
It was it was a little silly.
If it was the exact 7 that and not her in sort of another in the Confederacy form, I'd say, okay, yeah, there's still some biological differences in her body that make that best suited to if you're going to Borg her up, just to plug up an entry, you're not trying to fully Borg her, that you would kind of go with what her body knows. It's like muscle memory. And I think that's what they wanted to do. I think they were just careless.
Well, let's get into the confrontation with Soong there at the end, and Rios beaming in at the last minute, having his heroic moment to save Picard after Teresa patches him up, and he goes on his way.
He chose duty over love. How very Kirk.
For now, we'll see what happens next week, because I think they do talk about the idea of him staying behind. She's an advocate of it. We'll see what actually happens, but I think that is likely what will be the case.
He's going to stay behind for the cigars.
But he had that kind of corny moment where he kisses her and then he beams in and he gets there just at the split second to stop Picard from being shot. That was a little silly that the timing would be that exact, for dramatic purposes.
Yeah, maybe have him appear when Picard is like under duress and pull off a few cool moves. Rather than just you're there in the one moment you're there.
I guess we had that conversation from Soong about, I guess Soong's philosophy is love and fear is the same thing, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me either. But it's just there to juxtapose against what Talon says about love to Picard.
I can kind of see it as being like that in its weird way. That sounds like how a malignant narcissist sees the world. They don't see themselves as seeing it that way, but it kind of is how they see the world.
That's how Elon Musk is like, everyone will either love me or fear me. It's all the same thing.
Yeah,
That actually does
exactly.
seem realistic,
Like it
yeah.
is like how you treat people, regardless of whether you lend yourself that way. And since he seems to be like a guy, well, he's sort of a little megalomaniacal. Megalomaniacs like to give speeches. He's trying to find a way to lend himself, and I honestly could see him doing it. It doesn't seem that weird to me.
Again, Sung being the worst part of this episode for me when that gun, the Talon gun, is going to blow up because the person with the wrong DNA was holding it. So he tosses it into the air and then just runs out of the room. And they're like, "Oh, I guess he's gone. He's still out there. How are we going to stop him?" It's like, y'all could just like run down the hall and try to stop him. Like, I don't think he got that far. Like,
Right. You have a spaceship.
I mean, I know I'm not in particularly great shape, but I feel like I would have a good shot of finding like Brent Spiner and outrunning him and tackling him and stopping him from getting away if I really wanted to. So I don't know why like Rios or Talon didn't at least try.
Father, he's a master of vineyard stealth. He put some points into that. So yeah, no. It's and these are the things that frustrate me with the writing in general, is that they like will have some like strong bits of dialogue, strong moments, strong ideas, but then there's like some of these obvious things that like, did nobody bring that up? Did nobody like in the you set up you set up the combat hologram thing in episode 1, pretty clever, but you didn't think that the guy who just ran out the door that they might be able to just run after him. It sort of has that sense of like things like you said, kind of getting to the end and they're getting a little heedless.
Dave, and they might have had something better planned out at some point, but then after they started shooting, they had to rewrite some stuff. Like, oh, like these scenes didn't work in this episode, so we had to rewrite them, and then we don't have the budget to do this other thing we wanted to do. So what are we going to do here? And then you just have to come up with it on the fly, and that's
Sure.
how a lot of TV gets made. Sadly, even when you have like a pandemic to shut things down and you can write all 10 of your scripts ahead of time, so like when you start production, there's always going to be tinkering and changing. And I think he's probably not like a great example to look at, depending on who you ask, but George Lucas, one thing I've heard him say, talking about, making the original trilogy, when he original in the other Star franchise originally was going to not kill off Obi-Wan Kenobi on the Death Star. That's something that they changed when they were shooting. And he said, you can't look at making a movie as a script as a set of blueprints, and you have to build it exact. It's more of just a guideline and kind of a living document, and you make changes to the script as needed. And that's
I think for
what happened
nearly
here,
every
I think.
filmmaker, that is at least some stripe of true.
Here's a stupid nitpick that isn't a huge deal, but it's just a pet peeve of mine. It always annoys me in TV shows when it's two different parts of the world that shouldn't be daylight at the same time. When we see Rios in the apartment in Los Angeles, you see sun coming in the window, and then the sun has already began to rise in Le Bar, France. And so I looked it up. This is like April 14th, 2024. The sun sets in LA around 7:30 p.m. this time of year, and the sun rises in Le Bar, France at 6:30 a.m., and there's a 9-hour difference between those two time zones. And yeah, the sun should have already been out in LA by the time it came up in Le Bar. That annoys me whenever anything does that. When anything
that
gets
just
that
looks
wrong.
like the sun. Those are floodlights outside from setting up a sanctuary city.
Oh, okay,
So,
yeah, the sanctuary districts in
Yeah.
2024. Okay, got it. But I guess we need to talk about the final revelation of Picard's trauma. So here's our content warning for conversations about things like suicide and mental illness. But yeah, we find out that Picard bears some responsibility for the death of his mother. That he took that skeleton key, that he unlocked the door that the father had locked the mom up in, and she went and hung herself after Picard crawled in bed with her and fell asleep.
Yeah, this was a dark turn, sort of reminiscent in its suddenness of him finding out about his brother and nephew. Was it in Generations?
In Generations, yeah, he's had a lot of like terrible deaths in his family. It sounds like.
I hate to say it, but like when you get to if you get to your 90s, you will almost certainly have outlived a fair number of people, and even in that time, and you'll be some of them, at least in our time, that could have had fairly rough endings. You would hope by Picard's time that would be better, but we know that something of the nature of his family made it more difficult for him. But let's talk about like sort of the immediate impact of it. I did find that it was fairly disturbing, and was not actually what I expected them to do. Fathery, did you think that like that was on the table?
No, and it definitely has the shock value that they intended. It's kind of like a oh shit moment. Like I think I like made like a gasp or like an audible reaction to that when Antonia watched the episode. I remember her like reacting to that and it's so graphic the way that they show the imagery of her hanging there.
Right.
But it is kind of like that. I thought it was like a little artsy the way that they did like the reversal, the reverse photography of her, and Picard describing it as some memories are best lived in reverse, and
yeah,
they cover their bases fairly well with some dialogue delivered pretty well from Patrick Stewart about him trying not to remember this, and him being the one who unlocked the door, who discovered her body there. And the tie-in of that with her telling him, before, like, don't remember this bad stuff about me. Try to remember the good.
The fact that she was locked up at all seems a little dodgy to me. Maybe a little bit of a forced plot point. They are kind of out in the middle of nowhere, even in the 24th century. Maybe that made things a little difficult.
That's probably when Maurice should have just been like, you know what, like I'm calling the medical people, the doctors, whoever, like, even though like you don't want this, even though like you want to refuse treatment, like I'm gonna make this choice for you, is probably what he should have done.
Yeah. But I guess like this may have been like not the umpteenth time, but it's clear that it's happened before, and to some degree, it's like you can't go to the hospital
and she'll be fine
every time. Most of the time, it probably it's been okay, awkward but okay. There is some discussion in the comments of like, does Picard actually bear any responsibility for his mother's death? And I think we would probably all agree that no, he didn't have the knowledge he needed at the time.
Yeah, he's just
to assess
kid.
that. It's just that. Yeah, kids take on trauma. They think they're responsible for their parents' divorce and a billion other things like that. And so, yeah, he unfairly thinks of himself as bearing responsibility for it, especially because they were so close. Like, even if you could probably, I suspect he probably did get some counseling for it, and has maybe been even helped along. But it seems like it just, in his case, it allowed him to push it away and not truly deal with it.
Stress Free K has an interesting comment, and this is something that I thought about myself. But Stress Free K is saying, I think Robert harbored resentment for Picard, beginning with unlocking their mommy's door. And
I think one other thing that drove a wedge between he and his brother.
Yeah, and probably between like the dad and Jean-Luc as well. Like like you wouldn't. You'd probably be reasonable enough not to blame it on the kid, but part of you would always think like, well, I really wish you hadn't done that. And then especially with Robert,
Picard's dad, his specific dad, yeah.
Even with like Robert, like Robert being like the stuff that we heard in family of like, you were always the smart one, you always won the ribbon at school, you had to go be like this great Starfleet captain, all this stuff. It's like, yeah, this guy gets like all this credit, all these accolades and everything, but like, you remember like when he was the dumb little kid that unlocked the door and then your mom died.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
that would sting.
I've seen several people mentioning that there's going to be a sense of this will cast a shadow. It will add depth. If you didn't like it, it will annoy you. But like, it will inform any viewings of any Picard episodes in TNG, any of the movies and stuff from here on out. And you might like see Robert, who was kind of seemed like a D-bag very often, and get him a little bit better. Be like, oh, I actually held off and didn't accuse you publicly of killing our mom, but it was in my mind. right? It was something that was creating a resentment.
Hmm.
And maybe Picard even sensed that on some level. It's these are retroactive things, of course, but I think that a fair amount of that works pretty well.
Our friend Johnny Tsunami in the live audience says, I think he locked her up to keep her from hurting herself until she was lucid and could get treatment. And like,
I believe
yeah,
that's
I
what
think
the story intends us to take from it.
That's what Picard says. He says, like, my dad locked her up for her own safety and perhaps mine as well. Because, yeah, like, she was, like, trying to take the kid into the dangerous tunnels and stuff. So,
yeah.
Not Talon. I almost called her Renee. Like, no, that's a different character. Talon kind of gives a little speech about, like love hurts and it can come with a lot of pain, but it's always a gift in the end. And, you should, focus on the pluses of that. And that, that kind of explains, Picard's struggle with romances. Does he not want to get close to anyone? Because like the last time he was like genuinely connected with someone, it was his mom, and that ended poorly. And that's why he's never been able to have like a deep romantic relationship.
His father's 1,000 Ways to Die probably didn't help either.
But that's what a guy who like tries to talk your son out of like joining Starfleet and stuff, like that's what you would say, right?
Right. Well, it's kind of funny. We think it's funny, kind of endearing coming from McCoy, but his dad is like the kind of sort of darker side of that a little bit.
I don't know. That didn't really like stand out to me as weird, or like he told his kid there's 1,000 ways to die in those tunnels. That seems that didn't seem as remarkable to me.
I guess it's more the fact that he didn't seem to like be like saying like if he had sort of said it with like Jean-Luc, he's like know that I say this, because I care for you. It's like he put it in a curmudgeonly way. He did put it in like a kind of creepy way, I think. And if he had prefaced it by saying that, or followed it by saying, I care for you, but know that you can get really badly hurt. I'd never forgive myself if it happened. That kind of thing. So please don't. He didn't seem to be doing the I really care about you. He seemed to be doing the I'm a nihilist.
I didn't read it that way. I think he's a grumpy dude and probably not super.
He's not the best at communication.
He's not the best at communication, but I think he genuinely was trying to do the best he could.
I think so. I mean, that has been the intent of the season. I might quibble here and there with I think how they conveyed it, but I definitely think they meant to in some way, reveal that about his father, that he was trying.
Well, let's talk about the ending stuff. Raffi and Seven have a little bit of a conversation about, Raffi talking to Seven about like accepting her Borgness. And I liked that, that part of even like after, if you've processed your trauma, if you've come to terms with your trauma, it's still a part of who you are. And you can accept yourself and other people can accept you. And I think it's weird that they never kiss, that Seven and Raffi never kiss either here or earlier when they're about to make their suicide run.
It's true.
I think
they hold hands sometimes, but I guess that's maybe it.
What annoys the hell out of me, though, is what we were talking about when Queen Agnes says, tell your admiral that there must be two Renees, one who lives, one who dies. Why be that cryptic?
Yeah, that's the only way I can sort of write it off, give them a little bit of room, is to just say, Jurati and the Borg Queen were still dueling it out. We know that the Borg Queen in times of confusion has that weird thing where she's like sensing the other Borg Queens from other universes and might go into that weird sort of cryptic mode because she can't process it all. But like you kind of have to work to make it work.
And she takes their ship and flies away. So they don't have a way to get home, but they still have to go stop Soong from stopping the Europa mission. So that'll be our story next week. I guess the only other thing
when Picard and them came up, he didn't know what the deal was yet, right? I kind of thought that he'd see the ship flying on. Like he didn't know that they had essentially won in their way. He just saw La Sirena flying off, and he probably might have thought the Borg Queen had taken it. For bad purposes, right?
Oh yeah, I guess he.
I kind of want him to be like shit, as he
that
just
comes. Ship. We needed that.
Mad.
No, I actually love that when he sees that Seven's been reassimilated, he gets like so concerned, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And then Seven says, "I'm myself," And again, we understand like Seven's learned to accept this part of herself that she doesn't
Yeah.
like, but has had to learn to accept. But I love his like concern, him being like the one person who knows how traumatic Borg
Hmm.
stuff is. So I liked that little detail. And then yeah, we end on this idea of like we have to stop Soong because we didn't try to run after him when he fled the solarium a moment ago. So now we have this wild card. I don't know how much of a threat Soong poses when he's running around rural France right now. Like he's not even in the United States where the Europa
Fathery, if
mission is going
there's
to
a
launch from.
if there's a car to be found, you're in danger.
That does show how dedicated he is. Like, yeah, like I laughed at that when Soong is like just gonna do a hit and run and just running over people. But I mean that does show like, oh, he's totally all about killing Renee. Like he'll
He
go that
commits to the
far.
bit. He commits to the bit.
Do you have any final thoughts on this episode before we go into the Gorneg section of the show?
Um, not especially. Like I felt like it's two major poles for me were were Picard's the revelation about his mother and the complete overhaul of the Borg, a new era for that. And I actually really liked both of those. It's kind of allowing me to overlook some of the stuff that frustrated me because I was really into that.
Yeah, and I love that stuff too. And I get if if you're not okay with the Picard mom stuff, I get it. I can't argue with that. I'm not going to try to, talk you out of that. But, for me, it worked. It made sense. It was powerful. And I really, really loved the Queen Agnes stuff. And I'm so excited to see, there's so much potential there. I'm excited to see what goes on with the Borg going forward for the rest of Star Trek, for the rest of the franchise, decades from now. I hope that's something that has a lasting impact.
Yeah, well, like, imagine some years down the line and, like you're at a star base and Borg are just walking around and the essential nature of what it means to be a Borg is different. And,
Yes, that's what I want.
if Star Trek should evolve, right? That's evolution.
Yeah, I mean, we did it with the Klingons. Let's do it with the Borg.
Yeah.
Well, let's go into our Gorneg section of the show. These are all the Easter eggs, in jokes, and continuity connections that I thought were worth mentioning. Near the beginning of the episode, Jurati locks the Queen out using a fractal encryption lock. That is the same thing Data did to keep the Borg Queen out of the Enterprise E computer in Star Trek First Contact. When we see Picard as a little boy, he's playing with some toy ships, or some of those are actually Eagle Moss models. But we see the NX-01 refit, which was never canonized until now. But Doug Drexler, who designed the NX-01 Enterprise, he actually designed a version of it that could be refitted with a secondary hull, which if you're watching the video of this, I have the Eagle Moss of it here. But yeah, that's
Nice.
the secondary hull that made it look more like the Constitution class Enterprise and kind of help bridge the gap between the ship of Star Trek Enterprise and then the ship of the original series. Of that being canonized, there's also a Miranda class ship like the Reliant from Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, and the Promillion battleship in a bottle and the Excelsior model that we had seen in the episode Monster are also present there in their living room. I pointed out earlier that hologram Elnor, does have a mobile emitter on his arm, and the same device used by the Doctor in Star Trek Voyager to allow him to leave sickbay in the holodeck and roam around freely wherever he wants to go, regardless of holo projectors. And then lastly, I want to point out that when Picard says he used to have visions of his mom growing old, he used to picture what she would look like if she was able to live longer, and became like this little old lady asking him to sit down for a cup of tea and a chat. That is how a vision of Picard's mom was depicted in the first season of The Next Generation, in the episode Where No One Has Gone Before. When it's not real, it's just kind of like a weird like hallucination that's created from this weird part of space that the Enterprise was in that episode. But the way that Patrick Stewart played his reaction in that episode was just particularly powerful. And now whenever I watch this, it's going to have so much more meaning and weight to me of, Picard thinking like, oh yeah, this is that version of my mom I always imagined but never got to actually have.
Hmm. The music in that, and the kind of that sense of sort of wonder he has when he sees her, that sort of ethereal music that's playing, it kind of works nicely. It's a neat effect.
Well, that's all I had on Gorn Eggs, but we did ask people what did they think about last week's episode of Star Trek Picard, Mercy. Right, that was last week, right?
Yep.
Mercy. Yeah.
Episode 8.
So, Dave, what are people saying on the subspace transmissions?
So we got a lot of subspace transmissions, like a crazy high amount, which is why I'm going to read more of them than I usually do this time. I'm going to try and go through them quick so we don't take too long here. But some people had some pretty interesting thoughts, and for whatever reason, that episode brought out especially high number of comments. So let's just quick run through them. We'll start with. I'm going to butcher this name, Mark. It's like a French name, Lamdu, something like that. He says, I still can't tell if the second season of Picard is brilliance or garbage, but I'm having a hell of a lot of fun watching it. What a damn ride. Then Sean Eric, Hair of the Dog, now available. That's the name. Says, I really want to like this season, but it's uneven pacing, and for me, it's just a rehash of First Contact. Borg Queen, check. Time travel, check. Have to go back in time to make sure an event doesn't happen so the future is saved, check. It's just longer with more arcs. And then Travels with Psy, as if responding to him, says, I really enjoyed this ep. The acting of Jurati, Guinan, and Delancey was particularly good. Many have criticized several C-plots going on. I just think it was a diverse ensemble episode that progressed the story in several streams rather than one great torrent. Exciting. That was an interesting point to just kind of look at that as an alternate way of just another kind of storytelling. Let's see. Getting on to the Agent Wells portion of it. Natty Ice D20 Save versus Alcohol says, great weaving of storylines here. When Picard was being interviewed, my only thought was that if Gul Lamek didn't break him in Chain of Command, Rando Dude from 2024 wasn't even going to come close. And several other people had thoughts on Wells. Sarah says, I really enjoyed how Picard's empathy towards this little boy who grew up scared from one encounter could make a difference in saving the world. And Roswell DeLorean said, I have so much love for Agent Wells. To give his life in pursuit of understanding what happened as a small child, big hugs, mister. I will also mention on YouTube, Opinions No One Cares About said, as far as I've noticed, no one has asked the really important question, did Wells ever find his dog?
And that is a great question. Yeah, Maggie, the name of the dog was Maggie, I believe. But yeah, little boy Wells was looking for Maggie. He found some Vulcans instead. But what about the dog, damn it?
Well, there's one more episode. Maybe they'll wrap it.
Maybe.
Dr. Rebecca Legg, MD, says, I want to point out that the 7 Raffi storyline. It's a rare find. A queer relationship that is not centered around coming out or battling homophobia, but struggling to find connection and a working relationship just like everyone else has to. Let's see. Stephen McGowan says, is it me or are Q's power levels arbitrary at this point? He claims he can't do things when he snaps his fingers, but he manages to do other stuff, like convince the FBI he's an agent and replace Renee Picard's therapist without any fuss. Be curious to see if that is touched on very much.
Yeah. Though we talked about that last week, and we concluded he didn't do anything that was a display of supernatural power. It could just be it was all things a really clever man would be able to do.
It seems like it'd be a lot of work, but yes, it's within possible reason. A name that, boy, am I not going to be able to pronounce because it looks like an Irish name. McNiclerig, if it doesn't pronounce like that, says, I'm waiting for Rios to become his own great-great-grandfather.
Like Fry on Futurama, doing the nasty and the pasty.
Yes. I think, somebody must have posted that in the comments, you or maybe he did. Jill47 said the best moment for me was when the mention of stabilizing metal caused Seven to have a flashback to her assimilation at age 6. It was so powerful. It resulted in a taste hallucination. I was shook. I didn't know the Borg could still terrify me. Best Seven scene in the series for me. Nigel Lockett wonders, says Q moments were the most poignant with the thought of his mortality. Will Picard save him? I'm guessing this is meant to be read as Big Daddy 1010. says we finally get to see what Elorians are capable of, and that's true. Big bit of lore added in there. Here's another critical one. Denise Breen says, as a huge fan, I found this season so disappointing. Writing, pacing, it's all over the place and it's lazy. That's the worst part. This would have made a great TNG two-parter. And at times when the show is frustrating me, I agree with that.
I'm thinking three-parter. It'd be a lot to do in two, but yeah, it
Something
definitely could have been condensed.
And let me just wrap it up with a couple comments, two comments about Jurati here, two quick ones. Blether says, Jurati running on top of the cars in a red ball gown and combat boots. I think I found my new Halloween costume. And then Nick Cook says, also, Allison Pill is amazing. So just to give a little appreciation and shout out for her once again.
And she continues to be amazing. Every episode, she keeps getting like better and better and better. Like the first episode, we thought she was great when she was like drunk Jurati, and then ever since then she's just gotten better. Then we got to see her in the red dress. We got to have her singing. She was outsmarting the Borg Queen, and then now where she's become Borg Queen Jurati, which both of us are fans of.
It's gonna like it also really cements her importance in Trek continuity and canon stuff. Like that's gonna be huge. There's gonna be reverberations from here onward.
Yeah. I would love to see that be something that continues. 20 years from now, we still like Allison Pill like returns as the Borg Queen and something. I love that contribution to the franchise. But speaking of contributions to the franchise, next week we're going to be contributing a doubleheader show talking about not only the PICARD season 2 finale, but the Strange New Worlds series premiere. So be sure to let us know in the comments or tweet at me on Twitter or comment on the Tex-Trek Facebook page and tell us what you thought of this episode and what do you hope to see in Strange New Worlds. Until next week, though, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek and follow Fathery on Twitter at txtrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.